Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is where characters gather. It is time for another great content debate, author spotlight, and today we are going to talk about Anne Perry. Now, this is purely coincidence, but it is perfect timing. I must admit, it wasn't planned. It was absolutely coincidental. She definitely falls under the category of Victorian adjacent. The series that catapulted her into historical cozy fame and spotlight is definitely set in the Victorian era. And it is very well done. It is the series that introduced me to her as a writer. It is the series that I just absolutely fell in love with. And it is the reason she ended up being part of this series. And she has a fascinating life. She has a very extensive back catalog and is an incredibly reliable author, which is part of the whole reason for this series. So, I pulled a bunch of books from the library. I discovered some stuff at the library I didn't know she had written. And I am even more energized to read her than I was earlier. So let's talk about Anne Perry the person before we talk about Anne Perry the author. She was born in 1938 and she died last year on April 10th. And when she died last year, I learned something about her that I did not know before. And I thought for sure when I read the news stories that they were making it up because it just seemed so fantastical, but they were not. And you're probably wondering, hey, Tammy, what was that? Well, when she was 15, she was living in New Zealand at the time. This was 1954. She and her best friend at the time, whose name was Pauline Parker, murdered Parker's mother. And Pauline's parents were in the process of separating, and they were going to ship Pauline to South Africa to live with a relative during this entire process. And apparently, Anne, she changed her name to Anne Perry, by the way. She was actually born Juliet Marion Holm. So apparently Juliet and Pauline were just like the best of friends and had this entire complicated fantasy life together, and they couldn't bear the thought of being separated. And somehow that relationship and despite what journalists later in life, once they discovered who Anne Perry was in her past, tried to make the relationship. Anne Perry herself strongly stated and repeatedly stated that there was nothing romantic or sexual about that relationship, and Pauline has never spoken about the events of 1954. So, and the two girls decide to murder Pauline's mother. They go for a walk in a local park and proceed to beat Pauline's mother to death with a stone. It is a very sad tale about their lives, their friendship, parenting, the whole nine yards. So in 1954 in New Zealand, they were considered too young for the death penalty, but they were, however, sent to prison. And they were housed or detained separately, but they were both released 5 years later. It is a shocking sentence, in my opinion. These girls beat Pauline's mother to death with a stone. It took more than 20 blows to kill her. And the penalty they paid was 5 years in prison. I am not going to comment on New Zealand law at the time, but that does not seem like justice. So, she moves back to England with her family. She changes her name to Anne Perry, and this all is hidden from 1959 on. It does not become public knowledge until 1994 when the film Heavenly Creatures releases. And the media do some digging and they discover that Anne Perry is Juliet in the film. And she was forced to talk about it. I haven't seen the movie. I don't remember the... Okay, sorry. I got distracted by my neighbor again. So when she gets discovered by the media in 94, she expressed more distress at being outed by the media and the impact on her career as an author than she did remorse for her actions. So, has it changed my perception of Anne Perry as a person? Absolutely, it has. I'm not going to lie. It tells me something about Anne Perry the person. Did it affect my love for Anne Perry's writing and Anne Perry's books? No, it did not. Not in the slightest, because I loved her work before that. How she lived her personal life is her business, not mine, and it does not impact, for me, the quality of her work. So that's a little about Anne. So let's talk about her books. So Anne Perry has four distinctive series. She has a Christmas series, which I'm not counting among the 4 series, in which he released a Christmas novella every year. And as I discovered when I went to the library, she has 2 standalones, which I never even knew about. So let's talk about the standalones first. I haven't read them. I want to read them very, very much. I am fascinated. The library classified this one as science fiction. The other one I know is historical fiction. So the first one is Tahitha. Oh, and I will read the inside flap. I'm just fascinated by these. The world around her was the same. The sharp feel of the sandy ground under her feet, the aromatic smell of herbs and grasses, the wind off the sea. But inside her, everything was different. She was filled with emotions whose origin hovered at the edge of her mind. The harder she grasped at them, the more intangible they became. There was only one certainty, absolute and unchangeable. The book clasped in her hand was a source of all that was beautiful and precise, the beginning and end of everlasting joy. The power of the universe was in its pages. She must share it. Everyone must know. Her husband and beloved son assassinated, Thea, once queen of Cinnabar, is alone and in exile. Numbed by grief, she takes refuge in the lost lands, where she tries desperately to find meaning in a life that has robbed her of her family, her home, and her country. But in her quest for truth, which takes her far beyond the physical world she knows, she discovers that it does not come without cost. Terrible cost. Both an epic fantasy and an exploration of the eternal battle between good and evil, Tithia is the extraordinary new novel from the best-selling creator of the William Monk and Thomas and Charlotte Pitt Victorian Mystery Series. So, this sounds like this was published in 1999. I do know that when she returned to England, Anne Perry was it England or was it LA? Here, I am looking. I think it was in LA. She converted to Mormonism. So this sounds like this may be sort of adjacent to that. I'm still very interested. I still very much want to know. And this is a big old chunker of a book. It's just over 500 pages. It's like 522 pages. I am interested enough, based on what I have read from her in the past, to give this a try. I really, really am. And the other one is much higher on my list to try. That is called The Sheen of Silk. And I've heard that this is part of a series, but there is no information. This one was published in 2010. This one is... No. So she does have other books other than the 4 series I mentioned. She does have a young adult series of 4 books, which I have never read. She has an extensive backlist. Anyway, back to this book. The Sheen of the Silk. And this is set in, opens up in 1273. Arriving in the ancient Byzantine city in the year of 1273, Anna Zorides has only one mission: to prove the innocence of her twin brother Justinian, who has been exiled to the desert for conspiring to kill Bessaronian, a nobleman. Disguising herself as a eunuch named Anastasius, Anna moves freely about society, using her skills as a physician to maneuver close to the key players involved in her brother's fate. With her medical practice thriving, Anna crosses paths with Zoe Chrysophis, a devious noblewoman with her own hidden agenda, and Giuliano Dandolo, a ship's captain conflicted not only by his mixed Venetian-Byzantine heritage, but by his growing feelings for Anastasius. Trying to clear her brother's name, Anna learns more about Justinian's life and reputation, including his peculiar ties to Bessarone's beautiful widow and his possible role in a plot to overthrow the emperor. This leaves Anna with more questions than answers, and time is running out. For an even greater threat lies on the horizon. Another crusade to capture the Holy Land is brewing, and leaders in Rome and Venice have set their sights on Constantinople for what is sure to be a brutal invasion. And its discoveries draw her inexorably closer to the dangers of the emperor's treacherous court, where it seems that no one is exactly who he or she appears to be. Yeah. This truly has my attention. Again, it's just over 500 pages, and this one is 515 pages. I am so interested. I'm so interested. Yeah. Yeah. I love when I do these and I find books I didn't know existed and I need to suddenly read them. So that would be one of them. So, okay, let's talk about our Christmas books. Her Christmas Stories is what the series is called, and they're really just a bunch of novellas. Began in 2003, and the last one was published after her death in 2023. I do not know if one is coming out this year. I imagine there might be, but I haven't checked, so I can't promise that. So there are in total 21 books in her Christmas Stories, and this is the last published one that I am aware of. That is the Christmas Vanishing. As you can see, they're little slim, novellas. They're not long. They are usually set in Victorian era. So this one is Maria Ellison, which is Charlotte Pitt's grandmother. Maria Ellison, Charlotte Pitt's grandmother, accepts an invitation to spend Christmas with her longtime friend Sadie and Sadie's husband Barton in their picturesque village. But upon arrival, Maria discovers that Sadie has vanished without a trace, and Barton rudely rescinds the invitation. Once Maria finds another acquaintance to stay with, she begins investigating Sadie's disappearance. And that is very on point for all of her Christmas stories. They all involve a mystery at some, a small mystery. They all involve characters that are drawn from her other books, and they all invoke deep, meaning at Christmas. And they're not a huge time commitment. They're usually, under 200 pages. This one is 190. And if you're looking to get into the Christmas season and you're, wanting something different, I can highly recommend these. Even if you have not read any of the other series, it will not impact your ability to read these and fall in love. They really, really won't. Okay. So since we have run in to the monk or Pitts, let's talk about the Charlotte and Thomas Pitt novels. There are a total of 32 installments in this series. The first one was the Cater Street Hangman, which was published in 1979. And the last one was published in 2016. And needless to say, my library does not have her entire back catalog. Not even close. They do not have 2 full shelves of her books, and she could probably easily take, if you had all of her books, an entire bookcase in the library just to herself. So they don't even have 2 shelves of a bookcase for her, not even close to her back catalog. So I did pick a Thomas and Charlotte novel. I have not read this one, but it does have the most Victorian of Victorian covers. It is gorgeous. You definitely need to know. And this is Dorchester Terrace, which is the 27th book in the series. And Charlotte and Thomas Pitt novels are set in the 1880s and the 1890s, so late Victorian era. Thomas, as the Cato Street hangman opens up, you learn that Thomas is a police officer, which is still not a highly accepted thing in Victorian England. He is not married. He meets Charlotte, as the series progresses. They fall in love and they get married and they have kids and they have a life, in other words. And they are definitely upper working class. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're middle class as the series opens up, but that, as Thomas moves up in his career, that does change. And it is just this beautiful, well-researched, eloquently written series about Victorian life from a working class perspective. And it is so easy to immerse yourself in these books. And it is so easy to, come to think of them as, a reliable, friend that you can just, pick up and read. And because there are so many books in the series, they're delightful. They're absolutely delightful. And in the course of the Thomas and Charlotte books, you meet 2 characters named William Monk and Hester Latterly. Yeah. So Hester and William get their own series, and it started being published in 1990. The last one was published in 2018. And there are 24 books in the William and Hester series. And the William and Hester series takes place in the earlier Victorian period, 1850s to 1860s. So when they are much younger than you meet them in the Thomas and Charlotte series. And Hester is a nurse in the Crimean War. When the war ends, she returns to London and, takes up nursing in London, and you get a glimpse into that part of Victorian life. Monk is a private detective / Bow Street runner, and that is yet another wonderful glimpse into Victorian life. I can easily recommend this series as well. Excuse me. I would classify these as cozy, but not cozy in the sense of small town romance. Nothing bad truly happens, and everything is neatly wrapped up in 300 pages. That's just not realistic. So this is a William Monk novel. This is Dark Tide Rising, which is the last William Monk novel published. And again, my library does not have all the Monk novels sitting on the shelves. But as you can see, they're not thin little books. This one is, it's under 300 pages. It's 289. But then it's 289 of a hardback and not a mass market. So, there's more meat. These are great. I'll read you the flap of this one. Jacob's Island is a broken down waterside slum, a place of perpetual gloom where Monk is just as likely to lose a man to the mud and tides as to the criminals who hide in the shadows. Kidnappers have chosen this warren of tunnels and alleys as the site of a ransom exchange for Kate Exeter, the wife of wealthy real estate developer Harry Exeter. Harry asked the Thames River Police to secretly accompany him to the spot and ensure that no harm comes to him or his captive wife. But on arrival, Monk and 5 of his best men are attacked from all sides, and Monk is left wondering who could have given away their plans. As Monk follows the leads from Kate's worried cousin and a crafty clerk at the bank where Exeter gathered the ransom money, it seems undeniable that one of his own men has betrayed him. Delving into their past, he realizes how little he knows about the people he works with every day, including his right-hand man, John Hooper, the one colleague Monk has always been certain he can count on, but who is also hiding a dreadful secret. As the case runs into a series of deadly obstructions, Monk must choose between his own safety and the chance to solve the mystery, and to figure out where his men's loyalty really lies. I need to catch up on both the Pitt and the Monk series. And it will not be the last time I talk about an Anne Perry in an upcoming series. She is probably going to get mentioned more than once. So that leads us to the Daniel Pitt series. And there are 6 entries in the Daniel Pitt series. It began in 2018, and the last one was published in 2023. This is the last book published. That is The Fourth Enemy. Oops. And in this case, our hero is Daniel Pitt, and he is a lawyer, and he is also the son of Charlotte and Thomas Pitt, whose series I just talked about. And Daniel is very interesting as a character. So Daniel is not just a lawyer, he is one of those lawyers who always seems to fall into the odd cases that nobody else wants. And in his 6 novels, he has a unofficial partnership with the young woman Miriam Croft, who is a forensic expert. And as you can imagine, that is somewhat rare in this time period. Their interaction, the historical detail is again perfection. They're just interesting, and it's a different spin on the series his parents is it's a different series than the one his parents star in. It is different than the Monk series. It is unique to Daniel and Miriam. And I love that she has the breadth of skill to make each series separate and distinct, and yet they're interconnected and interwoven. And I just find that beautiful. I have read the least in the Daniel Pitt series. I think I may have read one book. I will need to finish those. Um, I yeah, I need to finish those. Okay, so the last series that I am intimately familiar with is her Elena Standish series, and these take place right before World War II breaks out. So the first one was published in 2019. The last one was published in 2023. There are 5 Elena Standish series. This is the one I am on. It is a darker reality. And our heroine is Elena. Obviously, it's named after her. And she is a noblewoman, I believe. Yeah. Yeah. And she was floundering in the first book. She gets recruited to go take pictures in Germany because she, can use her standing as a photographer to do a little covert spy work and track down her former lover from college and to see what he's up to. And these are just so well done. It's a completely different time period. They're unrelated to any of the Victorian, post-Victorian era books. They completely stand alone in their own right. And we all know how I feel about World War II books. I'm not a fan. I think it's an overdone genre. We don't need to, hear my thoughts on that. However, I have 3 of these to go. Yeah. I have 2 more after this one. I am going to savor those remaining 3 books because they are so engaging. The writing, the war effort, the spying, the all of it is just perfection. And I know I've said that a lot, but it's the truth. When Anne Perry writes a time period, she has her history down pat, and she has her atmosphere done so well that you find yourself transported. And the fact that she can write, mid and late Victorian as well as she does, and then she turns around and she writes a just prior to World War II series as well as she does, shows the strength of her craft. And it was superb. And she has more series that A, don't appear on my library shelves, and B, I didn't know she had. So she has a World War I series that she began in 2003. There were 5 books in the series. It concluded in 2007. I have not read or heard of any of that, but, if I run across them, I'll pick them up. And then she has a Christmas collection series, which is bind-ups of the Christmas stories. So we really aren't going to count that. She has a young adult series. It's called Timepiece. There are 4 books in that series. She published 2 a year between 2011 and 2012. And then she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 standalone books, which, I don't know how she had time to do anything else. She has short stories and anthologies. There are 4 listed. She was just absolutely a prolific writer. And generally, when writers are that prolific, their craft suffers. Or you get the feeling from reading them that they are publishing under ghost author, they're getting ghost authors to write the books and they're just publishing them under their own name. That is never a feeling I get from reading her books. It never even crosses my mind. There's never a hint that she didn't write it. And in some cases, yes, that is what a ghostwriter should do. They should be able to mimic the author for whom they're contracted. But some authors it's easy to tell. And if she ever had a ghostwriter, I can't tell. I absolutely can't tell. And I've read a lot of her books. So, I hope you have been intrigued by Anne Perry. I hope if you enjoy a good historical cozy, even though they're not really cozy, they're cozy, but they're not cozy. You'll give her a shot. She has an extensive backlist to choose from. I would recommend reading them in order if you possibly can, because they do build on one another, which makes them brilliant series, in my opinion. I'm going to try her 2 standalones. And if you want something that is Victorian adjacent for Victober, because you're really not in the mood for something, tome-like in quality, and you want a more modern writing style, then Anne Perry is a great choice for a Victorian adjacent mystery read. So, leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.